Okay, so the ideal passageway for air. Air ideally will come in through the nasal cavity. Okay, reason we'll come in through the nasal cavity is really for two things. Through here we've got hair, we've got mucus, and we've got blood vessels. So the idea is that it's going to filter the air, so anything that like dust and things like that, bacteria that's in the air, we can start to filter it out here. It's also going to warm it up. It will then travel down through the sinus to the back of the throat region, and this is where we've got this structure, which is called the epiglottis. All right, so that's our epiglottis there. The epiglottis normally stays open. Okay, what you will find though, and this ties to our digestive system that we'll look at next, is when we swallow, this is like a flap of skin that basically folds over, because here we have the trachea. Here we have the esophagus where the food goes, and we don't want food going down into our trachea, into our lungs. So this normally stays open to allow us to breathe, but if we swallow, that closes over, so food goes down into our stomach and not down into our lungs. This region at the back here is what we call the pharynx, and then at the top, this section here, that's our larynx. Okay, so that's the start of our trachea really, and then the main sort of branch of our lungs that goes down is what we call our trachea, and you might have historically called that the windpipe. You'll see the structure of that when we do our dissection, so I won't go into that too much, but along here there's still mucus, there's still things called cilia, so any bacteria and dust that finds its way down here can actually get flicked back up. So we can remove it so that we don't have it going into our lungs and causing things like infection. The trachea then branches off into two parts, so there's a left and a right side, and they are what are called our bronchies. Okay, so they're just branches within it, and then our branches continue to get smaller and smaller, and there's many what are called bronchioles until we get to the very end. And at the very end of those, we have what are called alveoli. So alveoli are tiny, tiny little air sacs. And our lungs is made up of multiple ones of these. Alveoli are really important because the fact that they're really small is designed to maximize surface area. So if we thought about just having two sort of chest size sacs for our lungs, if you opened it up, the surface area of it might be about the size of, say, a shopping bag when it's opened up and laid flat. The actual lungs, with all the alveoli increasing the surface area, gives it a surface area about the same size of the tennis court. Okay, so there's a lot of surface area within there, and that's to maximise the amount of gas exchange that we can have, so to get the most oxygen in and the most carbon dioxide out. We also have this muscle running along the bottom here. That's what we call our diaphragm. D-I-A-P-H. Diaphragm. And that's what helps regulate breathing. It's a muscle that sort of controls it. You'll also notice that we have our ribs. And between our ribs, we have something called intercostal muscle. Okay, and we'll look at the mechanism of breathing now. So at the end of the bronchioles, we have tiny air sacs called alveoli. And this is an example of it. So you can see our bronchiole here, okay, and there's multiple little air sacs within it at the tips. Now, around those alveoli, we have a network of capillaries, because our blood needs to get to these so that we can get gas exchange. So what we have here is our artery coming in from the heart. Okay, now this artery is blue, which goes against most of what we know, but this is coming from our pulmonary artery. Okay, it branches off into our capillaries, and what happens is the deoxygenated blood within here loses its carbon dioxide and picks up oxygen. And you should know from our previous video that when oxygen and hemoglobin mix, it turns bright red. So here we have our veins coming back. So this is actually going back to our pulmonary vein. And that's going to go back to the heart, and then it'll go out to the body. The pulmonary artery is bringing it in from the heart. So comes in, pulmonary artery, comes in through our capillaries. The carbon dioxide goes out into the alveoli. The oxygen gets transferred into the blood, and the oxygenated blood will go back to the heart to be sent out to the body. So combining these two ideas, what will happen? Diaphragm goes down. Air gets drawn in through the nasal cavity, goes down the trachea, through the bronchi, out through the bronchioles, and at the end of the bronchioles reaches the alveoli. There's gas exchange, carbon dioxide out of the blood, oxygen in. The diaphragm and ribs will then push inwards and basically squeeze the air that's in here. So sort of like if you squeezed a balloon, it'll then squeeze it, the air out of the alveoli, out through the bronchioles, out through the bronchi, out through the trachea, and then out of our body. Okay, so when we breathe in, the diaphragm contracts, okay, and that causes it to pull downwards. Now, that creates a pressure differential, okay, and in doing so, air is actually drawn in through the nasal cavity, travels through the pharynx, through the larynx, down your trachea, off into your bronchioles, and out to the alveoli at the end. What we'll also find when we breathe in is if we do deep breaths, our rib cage will go up and out, so it'll actually expand to give us more space within inside the cavity, and this can draw more air out from the environment. So breathing in, diaphragm goes down, ribs and intercostal muscles expand out, and air gets drawn in through the nose, down through your pharynx and larynx, down the trachea, through the bronchioles, and into the alveoli. When we exhale, what we have is the diaphragm relaxing, and when the diaphragm relaxes, it goes back up. Our ribs and intercostal muscles go back inwards, and this basically sort of like squeezes on those lungs. So now you've got this pressure pushing in on them, and that's going to do the reverse of what we did when we breathed in. So the air that's in the alveoli goes through our bronchioles, out our bronchi, okay? It'll head back up our trachea, and then, depending on what happens, either get exhaled through the mouth or through the nose. So if we were to look at the cardiovascular system in its whole, starting at the heart, we're going to start here on the right side. So we go through our right atrium into our right ventricle, and then blood gets pumped out through the pulmonary artery to our lungs. So it'll go into the capillaries that surround our alveoli. Carbon dioxide will come out, oxygen will go in. The oxygenated blood will then come back into our heart through the left atrium, into the left ventricle, out through the aorta. It'll go to the body, so through arteries, out to the body, through the capillaries. The cells will use the oxygen. Waste products like carbon dioxide will get picked up. It'll travel back to the heart, into that right side, go back to the lungs, carbon dioxide out, oxygen in, back to the heart, out to the body, and it's a continual cycle so that our cells are getting oxygen.